Nobody got time for that.
Under the correct conditions, the seed germinates to produce a young plant. The young plant matures and under the correct light conditions and temperature produces a flower. Inside the flower, male and female gametes develop. Pollination occurs when the male gametes are transferred to the female parts of the flower. Male gametes fuse with the female gametes at fertilization. This occurs in the female part of the flower. Following fertilization, a fruit develops from the female part of the flower. Fruits contain a seed and a structure to help move the seed away from the parent plant. The seed is dispersed with some agents carrying it away from the parent plant, and the cycle continues. A flower is formed from a bud. The cells receive hormone messages from the main plant body and gradually develop into 4 rings of specialized leaves. These have the sole functions of forming sex cells and making sure that fertilization occurs. Flower stalk. This acts as a base for the 4 sets of floral leaves. Sepals. Green in color and protects the flower bud. Sepals usually disappear after pollination. Petals. These are usually brightly colored, also produce nectar, a sugary solution from small glands.
The flower contains both male and female gametes. Flowering plants have both male and female structures. The male structure is known as the stamen. The stamen consists of the anther and filament. The anther contains the pollen grains which produce the male gametes. The filament is the stalk that supports the anther.
The carpel, the female part of the flower. Stigma, a platform on which pollen grains land. Style, a stalk which holds stigma in the best position to receive pollen grains. Ovary, a hollow chamber. The ovules develop from the wall of the ovary. Microphyll, this entry point for the male nucleus at fertilization.
In self-pollination, pollen is transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same plant. This is very efficient as the pollen doesn't have to transfer very far, but this does not offer much chance of genetic variation. Cross-pollination. Pollen is transferred from the anther of one plant to the stigma of a different plant. Some plants are adapted for insect pollination. They have brightly colored petals to attract insects. They also have scented flowers and nectarines. Nectarines are glands that secrete nectar. They make big sticky pollen grains. The grains stick to the insects as they go from plant to plant. The stigma is also sticky so that any pollen picked up by insects on the other plants will stick to the stigma. Some other plants are adapted for wind pollination. Features of a plant that are adapted for wind pollination include small, dull petals on the flower, and no nectarines or strong scents. All these aspects are so that they don't attract any insects. However, they contain a lot of pollen grain, and they're small and light so that they can easily be carried by the wind. Long filaments hang the anthers outside the flower so that a lot of the pollen gets blown away by the wind. Plants that are adapted for wind pollination also consist of a large feathery stigma to catch pollen as it is carried past by the wind. Fertilization in plants is the fusion of the male and female gametes. A pollen grain lands on the stigma of a flower, usually with the help from insects or the wind. A pollen tube grows out of the pollen grain and down through the style to the ovary. A nucleus from the male gamete moves down the tube to join with the female gamete in the ovary. Each fertilized female gamete forms a seed. The ovary develops into a fruit around the seed. Flowering plants can only be fertilized by pollen grains from the same species or a closely related species.
Seeds need to be dispersed away from the parent plant. If the young plant remains close to its parent, it would need to compete with the parent for resources such as light energy, water, and carbon dioxide.
There are 4 different types of dispersal. First, by wind. Second, animals. Third, water. And fourth, by an explosive mechanism. Many plants are able to reproduce asexually, without gametes, pollination, fertilization, and dispersal. This form of asexual reproduction, also known as vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation has certain features. 1. The new miniature plant is formed by copying cells from its parent plant, also known as mitosis. Secondly, the miniature plant can be nourished by the parent plant until it is established enough to live independently. Finally, the plant does not need to produce any flowers.
Artificial propagation is a form of plant propagation that will not occur naturally, that is, in plants living in the wild. Cloning is a feature of vegetative propagation. There is no mixing of genetic material from different parents. Therefore, the offspring are sharing the same genetic information, producing a clone. These members have the same characteristics as the parent. This can be useful if the parent plant is well suited for its environment. However, a disadvantage for this can be if there is an environmental change. If the parent plant does not have resistance against the changes in the environment, the parent plant and clones will die.